let's begin with you, Sten, as one of the three editors. So first of all, can you tell us about the motivation for writing this book, and also what you mean by the subtitle, The Decline of Western Military Power?
Well, thank you, Will. And yes, and speaking on behalf of my co-editors as well, of course, Olivier Schmidt and Emily Teusen, the book grew out of our curiosity as to why very powerful Western countries were losing wars, and they were losing them very slowly and very visibly, sort of a sustained losing effort. And so why is it that the West went from this era of predominance to one of losing wars? And as we pondered this and discussed it, one question that immediately came to mind was, is this really part of the great transition to a more pluralistic scene of power? Is this the rise of China, etc.? But these other powers, great powers, are not really involved in these wars that the West has been losing. So then we look to, is this why the weak win wars? We have a literature on that. And we were curious, isn't there something in the West itself that helps us understand why these wars have been a problem for the West without detracting from the ability of its adversaries to win wars? And so we looked inside the West, and we observed that there's a debate on continuous advantage of being the West, which has to do with its self-government, its civic tradition. It's a tradition of enlightenment and science and exploring new ideas, democratic government. And then there's another argument saying that the West is really a very, very short-lived phenomenon, pretty much confined to the 19th century. It got lucky, and so, of course, now it's no longer lucky, and so, of course, it's losing wars. And in this, we said, well, how do we sort out this debate on what the West is? And we looked at a couple of key concepts. One is temporality, which is about how the West perceives itself in time. Is time on the side of the West? Is the opposing side, is it losing as time moves on? How does it understand time? And then how does it engage war? And what we found, to be really brief, is that that there's an inherent tension in the West between institutions that believe time is on the Western side, that are progressive in their approach to history, that have a linear understanding of war or of time, and then institutions that see time as cyclical and war as inevitable tragedy that must be managed but can never be overcome. And in a way, the Western type of government is about maintaining a balance between these institutions. And perhaps the West was losing this balance. And as it did so, it also lost its ability to conduct war in service of political objectives. And this is what we explore in the book.
The book, as you say, is kind of divided into three broad themes: the sort of civic military tension, then the focus on norms, and then finally on military operations. Do you want to sort of unpack some of these broad themes, and then we can kind of delve into a couple of them?
Certainly. So the first section of the book, with all sections have 3 chapters, and then one scenario chapter that provokes you to think about what you've just been reading. But the first section of the book is about this debate on is the West, the Western civic militarism tradition, this tradition of keeping institutions in balance, those that believe in progressive time and those that believe in cyclical time, civil society and warriors, keeping them in balance to the benefit of effective military policy. Is this a permanent advantage of the West, or is this a very confined historical phenomenon? And what does that mean for how we think about the West today? So that's the big historical piece. In the second section, we focus on the normative environment that the Western states have navigated largely since the Second World War, with a very sharp distinction between peace and war. And then in order to confine war and manage it, but then obviously running into problems when adversaries, they explore the gray zone between these normative categories of peace and war. And in the final and third section of the book, we move to the military domain, military operations, and we look at why is it that during most of the post-World War II decades, the West became committed to speed in war. Fast war is good war, maneuver warfare, that sort of exploring the operational dimension of war, and how that became a set piece within this normative order of distinguishing between peace and war, and how that conception of how to run military operations is being challenged by a number of military developments as well, and what that means for Western doctrinal thinking. So one of the lessons that comes out of this is that to ponder these issues and manage them in a context of current war, the West needs to really slow down and appreciate the ability of adversaries to exploit conflicts within the West on how to see war and explore the timelines of war that our different institutions harbor.
Let's focus though on the normative aspect of the book, the second part, which Natasha, you have a chapter in. And your chapter is on intervention and how the West is sort of torn between two temporalities, one calling for swift action to protect civilians and the other sort of feeding this reluctance to go to war. Do you want to sort of expand on that and explain how your chapter fits within the book's argument?
Really, in the chapter, I'm looking quite a lot at the ambiguity and disagreement on norms of intervention within the West itself, as well as also looking on the other side at the understanding of those norms by, for example, Russia and China. And as you said, there is this, and as Sten said as well, this wish for swift intervention to protect civilians. But at the same time, there's a kind of desire to avoid protracted armed conflict. And I think, the disagreement on the one hand, there's this kind of idea that there is a consensus over intervention. For example, if we look at R2P, but actually, if you really look quite in detail at R2P, it's never really been accepted as a norm, or where it looks as if on the surface it's been accepted as a norm. If we look at the 2005 UN World Summit, where all UN member states signed up to R2P, they said we recognize there is a responsibility to protect and so on. At the same time, step aside from after the summit, if you like, on the sidelines, talking to different actors, you can see that there were rather different understandings of what this actually meant, even, right? And obviously, particularly then Russia and China, were kind of pushing back and saying, well, we don't need a new norm. Russia said, China said, we have to be very cautious in approaching the development of these new norms, especially in terms of protecting civilians and so on.
And Alexandra, you're an expert on German foreign policy. How do the book's arguments over norms and also military operations, how do they resonate in the sort of German debate over intervention and military operations?
Well, unfortunately, as you may know, there is no real German debate, at least not, of course, in intellectual circles and within the Ministry of Defense and with among politicians. But in a broader German public, and here I'm talking about the politically interested, informed German public, but still, when it comes to defense and when it comes to Germany's strategical role, actually, people are not either they're not really interested, or also I think they sometimes they want to look to the side. So yes, when it comes, let's say, talking about UN mandates, or talking about NATO sometimes cooperating with partners which maybe are not necessarily the world's finest democrats. This might be questions, areas, issues where a broader politically interested German public gets involved, and there's a debate what NATO should not do, or where Germany should be very carefully watching when the West is basically, that goes back to what Natasha said, if we, the West, or if first and foremost the US, are basically using international law, especially international customary law, by promoting their ideas.
Great. I think you've touched there on one of the real core ideas of the book, which is about sort of public detachment from strategic conversations. And Sten, in your section, and as well in the third section, there's this sort of discussion around how policymakers have kind of gone for this sort of fudge, this solution where they'll try and do war on the cheap through borrowing, or through going to private military companies, or whatever it might be. Do you want to expand on that and then talk a little bit? I know that Olivier obviously isn't with us today, but talk a little bit about how the military response is sort of to fight wars quickly and get it done with as fast as possible. So there is this focus on technology, which contrasts with the sort of slower societal approach to things.
One of the obvious reasons why the Western militaries will want to fight with high tech at high speed is because they're good at it, and because Western societies, they produce this high tech that they can instrumentalize in war to their advantage. However, it is also about the military as an institution responding to a disconnect that has been within Western societies latent for at least a couple of centuries, whereby liberal societies, civil society in Western states, they paid politicians to be left alone. And so they paid taxes, and politicians then established professional militaries and etc. And they did war, and so the tension was built in between the progressive part of Western society and the cyclical warring part of society. For a moment, there's Western societies have tried to connect them with conscription and other mechanisms, but what we established in the book is that these mechanisms, they have either been torn down or they've been weakened. So we're back to a schism between the military as an institution and civil society as an institution. And so it's in the interest of the military, if it's asked to fight a war for society, to fight it fast and hard, because it knows that society doesn't understand war, and it expects a quick victory that will end with a step towards a progressive, better future. That's a lot. And the military, knowing that, a sustained military campaign will typically, involve a lot of cost, tries to go for quick victory. And the disposition for this comes out of the maneuver warfare paradigm that we have sort of become accustomed to since World War II. And so on top of all this, you have Western decision makers. And what one of the chapters lay out very nicely by Sarah Krebs and Adi Rao is that they used to be in a position where they had to negotiate the military and society, and thus reach a compromise that would be tenable, because they had to tax society to run war. But increasingly, war is financed by borrowing. you go on the financial markets and you obtain the finances you need to run the war without taxing society. And so decision makers have loosened their ties to society. We do offer some policy proposals or ideas. We don't pretend to be able to fix everything here and now, and we leave it to smarter people to figure out how this can actually happen. But we do put some ideas on the table for what needs to happen. One, in Western societies, Western governments, we need to be more humble about what war can actually achieve. So if we have doctrines like don't do stupid stuff, you probably all remember that. It's in a way, it's a terrible doctrine because it suggests that you get to control what to do and not to do. But you may not have control, and war may be imposed on you. And so you want to start thinking about war, even though you don't like war. Second, you want to think about what happens after victory. There's coexistence. So the communities you fight today will be there tomorrow, even though the leadership changes. And you want, as a society and as government, to think about these relationships in the longer term. Thirdly, you want the costs of war, high taxes, the cost to social well-being and human life. You want that to be visible to society and be felt in society, because that will put constraints on decision makers so that they actually ponder war for what it is. The totality of that is we need to slow down, and we need to recognize at a political level that war does belong to policy, and that we need to wrap our heads around the way in which limited efforts can serve limited objectives. We've lost the sense of that, but we need to re-establish that.